guys, how are we? Kansakija here. This is Inspire YG. If this is the first time you're popping in on one of my videos. I was an international student. Moved to Australia, specifically Sydney, from Kenya, East Africa, and started this foundation. It's actually a foundation, but I do have a couple of platforms on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and I'll put some links up here somewhere on my platforms, and you can check it out to see what I do with those platforms. However, this is Inspire YG. YG is an acronym for Young Generation. So I started this foundation or initiative with a hope to sort of share my journey of an international student, which hasn't been like easy, but it has been very, very what's the word? Miracle is the word. It has been a miracle. It has been fulfilling. It has been a decision that I made that, looking back today, I cannot regret, and I have no regrets. And so I've had a fair share of opportunities, like I said, and I felt like a lot of international students don't always know what are the opportunities that are there for them in Australia. And I just thought, you know what, these platforms are there and they're free anyway. Why don't I just jump on them and share my journey in case someone else will want to jump onto some of those opportunities like I did. So today's video is a very interesting video, and I'll be talking about some of the changes that have happened in the world of international students post pandemic. And I mean, in terms of looking at the shortages of skilled workers in Australia specifically, and what those changes mean to international students, or even to the wider Australian community, the businesses, the universities, or the educational institutions, and what have you. So it's a very interesting video. So if you are someone out there who is an international student or an aspiring international student from anywhere in the world, and you are thinking of coming to Australia, any state, any city, this is a video that might be helpful for you or someone that you may know. So stick around. I'll be back with more shortly. So welcome back, Inspire YG once again, Konsakija. So I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned in the past couple of weeks in terms of what's happening within Australia, within Australia, what is happening currently, and what are some of the issues or some of the things that are being spoken in different spheres, touching the government, touching politics, touching education, touching international students and migrants as well. So there was a summit that happened, it must have been 2 or 3 weeks ago now. And in this summit, it was called Jobs and Skills Summit, where you have anybody who have an interest in the economy of Australia, or anybody who is touched by the economy of Australia, had a vested interest in that summit. And so we're talking about politicians, we're talking about business people, investors, education people who heads, or people who have a vested interest in the educational institutions within Australia. They were in this summit. And so some of the things that were being spoken about, obviously it was organized, or it had the federal government in. A lot of people within the federal government were in that summit, and some of the things that they were talking about, or some of the things that were raised, were obviously they had hopes of tackling the shortages of skilled migrants. So for those of you who don't know, in Australia, there has been a lot of dependency, for lack of a better word, in some industries. Uh, depending. There has been a lot of industry that has been affected whereby industries, for example, industries like health industry, hospitality, and what have you, they have heavily relied on migrants, or at least temporary or short temporary migrants. When I say temporary migrants, these are people who come from other countries. They don't have permanent residency, or they're not Australian citizens, but they have they're either studying or they are here on a temporary basis, and they have a working visa. So these industries have heavily relied on these groups of people, so temporary migrants. Now, what has happened with the pandemic in Australia, there was obviously lockdown, and the lockdown in Australia extended for literally 2 years. And so for 2 years, the borders were shut, and people, and especially these migrants, temporary migrants, or people who held temporary migrant visas, they were stuck in their countries and they were not able to come back to Australia. So what did that mean for the wider Australian community and the economy especially? Was a lot of industries were struggling because they didn't have enough staff, and obviously they didn't have workforce, so they were really struggling, not just economically but work-wise. So let's talk about what has happened now after the borders have been open. So the borders have been open now for a minute, and I mean, I don't know who wouldn't have seen this coming when the pandemic happened, and the then Prime Minister Scott Morrison, he actually announced that if you're not an Australian, I think this is the time to go back home. This is the time to go back to where you come from. In the middle of a pandemic, when the whole world is trying to figure out what this thing is, the people who are actually part of the cohort, or the group of people who are also part of the reason why the Australian economy is growing, you're busy telling them, pack up and leave, because now we don't need you. We have to help our own. I remember seeing that clip, and I actually touched it on one of the videos that I did last year, and I said, this might come to bite the government in the future. Now, the problem with politicians is they think of now. The majority of them think of today. They don't think about the future. And it's a bit selfish, because think about it, when he made those comments, so I made a couple of notes from that summit, from what I took from that summit, and a couple of other articles that I've read stemming from what was discussed in that summit. And I'll just sort of, be looking at my notes, and I'll share with you what I took from it. So obviously what happened was the Minister of Home Affairs, they announced that the government was going to raise the migration cap. So they were going to have more spaces, or, open up the country more for a lot of immigrants to actually get permanent residency. And so the cap, just pre-pandemic, it was 160,000 spots for people who could apply for permanent residency, and it went up 35 spots to 195,000. Now, obviously, like I said, they noticed that there were a lot of industries, or actually the most required industries, like health, aged care, within aged care, nurses, hospitality, chefs, and people like those industries were affected, because a lot of them relied on international student or temporary migrants, and so that is almost like a ripple effect, because it's still being felt today. A lot of those industries have not managed to recover. They're still struggling to find staff and find temporary staff. So some of the issues that were also discussed were the cost of living is going up in Australia, and there's also low labor. And so the things they were discussing were obviously increasing that annual migration cap to increase the number of spots, supporting businesses, and supporting women and older people. to remain in the workforce, or to see how they can come up with things. There are things they're calling flexible work, flexible work schemes or systems, where, let's say, a woman, woman has gone on maternity leave, see how you can support them even after their maternity leave. They can work from home and so take up more shifts in that kind of way, or support older generation who want to remain in the workforce, support them to stay in the workforce. So those are some of the things that were being discussed. Now, the other thing that was discussed, or that I took from that, was there are a couple of ways that people can actually be able to stay in Australia. And if you have studied here as an international student, or you come directly from your country and this is a place you would like to study, or to work, some of those things that came up were, there's a couple of ways you can do that. So migrants are being sponsored by their employers, and this is for a visa to stay in Australia. Now, the moment you're sponsored by an employer, depending on the employer, depending on the state, there is obviously a requirement for you to continue working for that employer for at least 2 to 3 years after they sponsored you. Then there's something else called state and territory sponsorship, where you get sponsored by a state. For example, so with state nomination or territory nomination, what happens is you get nominated by a state. For example, if you're in Sydney, you will get nominated within New South Wales. And what that means is the state gives you 5 points, because with state nomination or territory nomination, they look at a couple of things. They look at, are you applying to work in a marketable field? When I say marketable field, are you in aged care? Are you nurse, social worker? Are you doing engineering, construction managers, child carers? Are you within software and application programming kind of industry, early childhood? So electricians. These are all some of the courses that are marketable in New South Wales at the moment. So if you are within a marketable field, what is called, that's loud. If you're within marketable field, what they call skilled occupation list, then you could actually get a state or territory nomination, and that's normally 5 points. It also works with point system. I don't know if I'll be able to show a screenshot of what point system means. I might try and put one here. But point system means you get points for your age, you get points for studying in Australia, you get points if you studied in the regional, you get extra points. If you have work experience, whether it's from overseas or within Australia, you get extra points. And all these points are added up, because I'll talk about point system later on in this video, but all these points add up to determine if you're actually going to be accepted, or your nomination will be accepted by a state or a territory. And also you have to be under 45 to go through this kind of sponsorship. So now, so obviously if you're thinking about coming to Australia to study, or coming to work, or coming to live indefinitely, these are some of the systems. These are some of the systems that are there to allow you to do that. So the other thing that I remember, or the other thing that I wrote, was many states ask their potential applicants to enter their details in the Department of Home Affairs Skill Select system. So there's a system called Skill Select. It's online, and you pop in there and you tick, or you upload your documentation to prove. Like if you say you studied in Australia, you're obviously going to put, or to upload your transcript there, or your certificate of completion. You need to prove every single thing you say you say you're claiming points for. So if you say that you've studied, or you've got work experience from overseas, you've got to prove. So you have to put a letter of your former employer there, something like that. So I might show a breakdown of the point system here, just a screenshot. Now, the criteria for state nominated visas can vary because it depends on where you're applying and where you want to go. Now, some places are harder or they're competitive because a lot of people want to live there or want to work there. For example, some people, majority of people obviously want to be in New South Wales, and when they're within New South Wales, they want to be closer maybe to the city. So you'll find a lot of people want to live and stay in Sydney, and so same thing applies to Queensland. A lot of people may want to live in the city. In Brisbane, a lot of people may want to live in Melbourne if they are going to Victoria. So there is no fair distribution of workforce when it comes to application, and I think I will mention later what has happened, and I think this is what the government had in mind, but I'll mention later what has happened with that lack of distribution of workforce across the country. So New South Wales has the largest allocation of state nominated positions with more than 12,000 places. The occupation list, they had said it would take a couple of weeks, but it actually came after I wrote these notes. The application list, occupation list was on their website literally the following couple of days. And it has caused a bit of an uproar. I'll talk about that later. I will see if I can touch on it later on in this video, but it has really caused a lot of uproar. And what are the jobs of the future according to the government skill priority list? The jobs of the future that are expected to remain hot in demand are construction manager, registered nurses, civil engineering professionals, early childhood teachers, information and communication technology in business and system analysts, software and application programmers, electricians, chefs, child carers, and aged care workers, aged care and disability support workers. These are some of the occupations that are really highly in demand across Australia. So the Deputy Prime Minister stated that the pandemic and border closures had lessons for Australia, that the government has simply not been training enough of Australians. So there's a professor known as Professor Sit. He stated, while domestic training is beneficial, those who are willing to take on jobs that are in need of filling are not always in Australia, making the country's labor shortage issue complicated. So there was a politician who is from the former government, and his point was, we are trying to fix the labor shortage in Australia by trying to get people from outside of the country as opposed to training the ones who are here. So this professor, though, met him with a question. You could train Australians within Australia all you want, but like courses or fields of work like nursing or disability support worker or aged care, chefs, these are not jobs that a course at uni is enough to help you. Like, you are going to need more than university credentials to actually do better, excel, thrive, and still be okay, whole, without burnout, or without feeling like you're in the wrong profession. It's more of a calling. These jobs are more of a calling or a vocation. They are more like a way of life. They are more a passion than they are a profession. They are a profession, yes, but I believe they are more of a calling because they take more of you, and you need more. You need more than, because I don't even think remuneration, increased pay can give you the motivation that sometimes the nurses need. I think being passionate about helping people and being out there and in those kind of spaces and vulnerable spaces and giving your all, because you're dealing with vulnerable people. Patients are vulnerable people in the community. Yeah, patients are vulnerable people in the community, and so I believe that these jobs are more of a vocation. And so my experience working in the health industry, at least mainly within aged care setting, and I've seen that those kind of jobs are mainly taken up by immigrants. And when I say immigrants, it's international students, people who are on temporary visas, and there are always people from overseas. So you rarely see a lot of Australians in that space, depending obviously on where you are. Like, I've been based in Sydney, so I don't know how the situation is the same in the regional areas, but that has been my experience within Sydney. So what happened was, when they stated, when I did this video, they had not, like I said, New South Wales government had not released that skilled occupation list, which is a list that tells you which people which people they need within their state. Which they were talking about the shortage of labor within Australia. They were not specific that, oh, in Sydney or in New South Wales they need these occupations, or in Queensland they need this, or in regional areas they need this. They were not specific. They just said Australia has got shortages of labor. And so a lot of people were hoping that, okay, you've increased the number of people, that the number of spots that you need, so that means you're gonna be lenient. But shock on everybody when New South Wales changed their system, changed their laws. Changed the way they do things. And for example, them saying that they needed chefs originally, before this change, like, chefs would need like 65 points if they were trying to get state or territorial nomination. They would need only 65 points to get through the system to apply for their permanent residency. And at the moment, last time I checked, within New South Wales, they were needing 90 points. People like, I think, accountant were needing almost 100 points. I think it was 100 and more. Teachers were needing nearly 80 points. Social workers, I think they were at 75 or 80. And so people were wondering, you are saying you have shortages of labor, but you are asking for so much. Because when I show you a bit of point system, you're going to understand how it works. And sometimes it's not easy to get those kinds of high points. So you need to do extra work, more than just your studies, to garner those points so that you can get a state nomination. So what I believe could have happened was, probably the government would have wanted to have that distribution of labor or distribution of workforce across the country. Like I said, a lot of people don't always go to regional areas, but at the moment, that is where a lot of opportunities are, not just to study, but also opportunities for jobs and opportunities for living in Australia indefinitely within different channels. And I believe it's because there's so many reasons why people would want to live in, let's say, Sydney or Brisbane or Melbourne or Perth, and not want to probably live in Wagga Wagga or live in regional areas. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of factors. However, people who have chosen the route of regional have seen more opportunities, as opposed to people who've been in the city with these kinds of changes. I believe some of these things are almost like a case-by-case situation, because life after the pandemic has been so uncertain for a lot of people, especially on a temporary visa. However, I still believe there's so many opportunities. So if you come into Australia for the first time and your hope is to study here and maybe hopefully practice here, those are some of the things to think about. Because you can study in Sydney, you can do your accounting degree in Sydney, and you might not be able to get a job here. You might not be able to get a state nomination because of the high level of competition, and the skyrocketed point systems. So I hope that makes sense. I'll try and put in as many clips as I can to sort of elaborate what I'm saying. But if you have any questions down below, please comment down below, and let's have that conversation. Let me know how you're feeling about the changes, especially if you're within New South Wales, if you are affected by any of those changes, and what you think, and what are your next steps or steps moving forward. So yeah, if I know this is going to be developing news, because I know so many things are going to change and so many things will happen, or so many things will take a turn or change. And when that happens, I'm gonna sit here and I'll do another video on those changes. But for now, those are the changes, and those are some of the things that I learned from the summit, the Skills and Jobs Summit. What was it called? It was called Jobs and Skills Summit. So I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about a lot of things, and this platform I share a lot about. Oh, I'm shaking. I'm shaking the mic. On this platform, I share a lot about the things that I'm passionate about, and some of those things, like I said, it's education and a lot of things that I've learned within my life and within my journey living here in Sydney, New South Wales. So thank you so much for popping in. I really appreciate you taking your time to watch this video, and please don't hesitate to comment down below and share with me your experiences on your journey studying and living in Australia, working in Australia, or your journey planning to do the same. And let's see how we can support each other in this journey. So I will put on I'll put a clip here on my Facebook so that you can check out my Facebook channel or my Facebook platform, so that you can go there and follow and like, and my YouTube and my Instagram as well, Inspire YG, Facebook Inspire YG, on Instagram as well. So if it's your first time here, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share with your friends, and let's grow this platform together. Appreciate you, and God bless you, and have yourself a good week ahead. Bye.